Hi, welcome once again. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the story of the Bible. And today I'm going to be talking about Genesis, which talks about the book of the beginning. It's the first book of the Pentateuch. The Pentateuch are the first five books of the Bible, also known as the Torah. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form or void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. The Spirit of the Lord hovered around the waters, and God said, "Let there be light." And there was. God created the universe in the first 5 days. Every other thing was created. On the sixth day, man was created. God created man in his own image. In his image created him, male and female created he them. God created man in his image after his likeness. And this man, he created him to be the ruler over all the other creation. He created him to have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over every creeping thing that creeps upon the face of the earth. In chapter 2 of Genesis, we talk about how that process came into being, how man was created, how God gave Adam the responsibility to take care of all the creation. He named the creation, he was supervising every creation, and then eventually, while he fell into a deep sleep, out of his rib, out of his side, God made woman. And when he saw her, he said, "Wow, this is beautiful. This is the bone of my bone and the flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman." So he also named his wife. And then they were living peacefully, enjoying the fellowship with God perfectly in the garden. And then in chapter 3, we were introduced to the instruction that God had given them, right? God had given them in chapter 2 that you have access to every tree living in this garden. You have access. But the tree of the knowledge of the good and evil, don't touch it. Don't take out of it. But then in chapter 3, we're introduced to the serpent being more subtle than any other feet of the beast. And the serpent tempted Eve to be able to sin against God and told her that, "Do you think that God is trying to prevent you from enjoying these fruits, that you should partake of it?" And then she did. And when she did, she also gave it to her husband, and that introduced sin into the world. That introduced sorrow into the world. And then God came in as all the time to fellowship with them. And they were like hiding. They were afraid. Initially, prior to that, they were naked or unashamed. But now they had sinned and now they are naked. They are feeling shame. They are trying to clothe themselves with fig leaves and all of that. God said, "Okay, where are you? Where are you, Adam?" And then he said, "I was afraid. I heard thy voice and I was afraid. Have you taken of the fruit that I said you shouldn't?" They said, "Yes." And then they started blaming. The man said it was the woman whom you gave me that caused me to do this. And the woman also blamed it on the serpent. None of them took responsibility for their action, for their sin. They blamed it, and this led to curse, the cause of work, the cause of labor, that from the ground we start suffering labor pain, and then the woman suffering labor pains as well came as a result, and then the serpent as well. God cursed that out of his belly, it will continue to just crawl, because Satan entered into the serpent. Is also known as the old serpent. But then in chapter 3, verse 15, there was a promise that the seed of the woman will come and bruise the head of the serpent. That seed of the woman will be a prophecy that will be fulfilled later in Christ as we go on in this story of the Bible. Chapter 4 opens an interesting story of how Adam and his wife, they came together and they copulated, and then Abel and Cain were given birth to. Abel was a shepherd man, while Cain was a farmer, and they brought their sacrifices to God. God was pleased with the sacrifice of Abel, but was displeased with the sacrifice of Cain. And this caused him to be so upset and mad at the fact that his sacrifice was displeasing to God. And instead of him making amends of that, he killed his brother. And when he did, God came asking him the question, "Where is your brother?" And guess what? This man asked God another question again, asking God, "Am I my brother's keeper?" Just imagine that. And this was what just showed how the children of Adam and Eve degenerated. And mind you, after Adam and Eve sinned, they were banished from the Garden of Eden by the angel, and they were no longer having access to that garden, and they had to be out of the garden and now start populating the earth and all of that. Okay, so God also said that the blood of Abel was crying because he had been slain by his brother. So sad. Now, in chapter 5, we see that death has been introduced into the world. You see so many, somebody lived and died, somebody lived and died, and that continued up until there was an exception in the man Enoch, the man that walked with God, and it was not, for God took him. This man lived righteously, and he was like, you are exceptional. God took him out of there. The story continued. The sons of God were having affairs with the daughters of men. Different interpretations have been given to what that means. Some think it's Nephilim, some think it's people having sex with angels. We'll go into all that questioning later, but I'll continue the story. In chapter 6, we deal with the introduction of a man that, when God look at the whole creation, is looking at one man, Noah, whose lifestyle was distinct in contrast to others. He was still a sinner man like every other person, but his life was different, was unique, was righteous in contrast to his other people. And this man, God called him out. He walked with God. God made him, he was a preacher of righteousness, going, calling people. God is saying that there's going to be rain, which has never happened before. Come into the boat, give your yield yourself to the Lord and all of that. I almost said give your life to Jesus. Anyway, so come into the boats and all of that, but they didn't listen. These people did not listen to what he had to say, and a lot of them perished because the flood eventually came, and they all perished. That happened. The flood came in. Noah, no, the flood happened. Noah and his family was preserved. But guess what? After they were preserved and after all the flood that ended, you see sin still in the world, because after the whole generations had been wiped out, a global flood, this man was drunken with the wine on his vineyard, and then his son saw his nakedness, mocked him, went to call others to come see, but those ones discreetly came in and covered their father. And then that led to a curse of his generation as a result of that, by the way. Anyway, that continued. Then in chapter 11, it was still a roller coaster. Chapter 11, the people gathered, they were in one language, they were in one accord, they wanted to build the Tower of Babel that will reach to the heavens. And then God was like, look at these people, they are so determined in their mind to do whatever they've proposed to do. And then God said, we're going to separate their language, because my original intent is that they should go, be fruitful, be multiply, and spread across the earth, not to be concentrated in one place and say they just want to be all by themselves and build a tower reaching to the heavens. So they wanted to make a name for themselves, and God's like, this is contrary to my plan. Okay. And then there was confusion of language. New languages were formed. People were scattered all abroad and all of that. And then in chapter 12, there was the coming of a man, Abraham, into the story. He was the man, Abraham, from the land of Ur. And God said, Abraham, I've called you. Come out from among this, your family of idolatry. I want to take you on a journey. Will you walk with me? And this man took that journey of faith, started to head to Canaan as God called him. He went with his wife Sarah and Sarai, and also with his cousin Lot, and they went on this journey. All right, as they went on this journey to Canaan, they were there. There was a lot. There were people already inhabiting that land. So pay attention, because many a times there are many questions people have about worrying about the Bible, that the Bible tells us a narrative based off of the things God wanted us to pay attention to. There are many parts of the stories. For example, there were people already living in Canaan. They didn't write all their names in the Bible. When you go through the table of nations, they give us the head of those nations. They did give us the specificity of all the people in those nations. But there are people there. So the Bible is letting us know what we need to know to be able to understand the story that God is communicating with us. Okay? All right. So Abraham was called by God. He took on that journey of faith, and then We go on, he's walking with the Lord and all of that. There was famine in the land. He had to go to Egypt. And then in Egypt, he's telling his wife, you got to lie because tell them you're my sister because they will kill you because you're so pretty. And when you get there, you tell them you're my wife, they're going to take you away from me. So just tell them you're my sister. Eventually, he was caught in the lie. And then the king said, why? You didn't need to lie to me. And they left him. Okay. Abimelech, the king of Egypt at that time, they left him for for that. Is it Abimelech? I don't know. Yeah, because I'm trying to just say all of this from my head. Okay. So something happened afterward. Lot, who came with him, the servants of Lot were fighting with the servants of Abraham over their flock and all of that. And Abraham is like, we don't need to be fighting. Maybe we should separate. And Lot was like, okay. And he said, where do you want to go? And Lot chose the plains of which led to him going to Sodom and Gomorrah area. And then he went on that journey. And Abraham stayed in Canaan. And then eventually there was an issue that happened where some people ransacked Lot, and then Abraham came to his rescue to to help him in that situation. So Abraham rescued Lot from the king that had taken him captive, and then the whole situation after that, he had an encounter with the priest of Salem, and then offered tithes for him, and then worshiped God. And afterward, God called Abraham again in Genesis chapter 15, telling him that he's going to make him great and is going to be a great nation, and promised him of Isaac coming in and all of that. At this point, this man was in his 80s. He had not yet had his own child. Then Sarah got to a point where she was so frustrated with the whole waiting and was like, Abraham, you know what? I think you should just go in to Hagar, sleep with her, and then if she gives birth, that's fine. She gives birth by me, because at that point in time, in the Near East, the people of the Eastern people, they were okay with, okay, they had this tradition that if you own a slave, that slave, whatever child is of that slave, is yours. You own the slave, right? So that was still what was happening at this point in time. So he went in, slept with her. They gave birth to Ishmael, and Ishmael, Hagar started, mocking the boss, that is Sarah now, because she was barren. She hadn't given birth. It was mocking her, and she got furious. Like, what are you talking about? What's going on with you? And that led to her sending her packing, right? And in that moment, God is like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna show up for you. I'm gonna help you reconcile them. Try to do some reconciliation, but eventually they had to like separate. God told Abraham to like go make peace between them and tell Hagar to like respect her boss and all of that. And eventually, years passed. God showed up. Isaac was born to Sarah. All right, then in Genesis chapter 17, there was the covenant of circumcision that came about, that every male child that is born to Abraham and his generation will be circumcised in their foreskin as a sign of the covenant, an everlasting covenant that God will be having with this man, Abraham. Afterward, there were three visitations of an angel. There were three visitors, three angelic visitors that came to visit Abraham, spoke with him, spoke to Sarah, spoke to Abraham, telling him that the promise of Isaac is still going to come to pass in his life and all of that. And when Sarah laughed, Sarah heard it, she laughed, thinking it's still a joke, but God is faithful to whatever he promises. He's still going to get it done. Either way, whether we laugh or not, whatever God promises is still going to come to pass. Then they also told him that, okay, there's nothing God made a statement whereby he was like, he's not going to hide anything from his friend Abraham, seeing that he's going to raise his children after him. So God told Abraham about the fact that Sodom is going down because of their homosexuality and perversion and evil. And Abraham started pleading because he knew he had Lot there and his family, and he was pleading if God could find 50 men, 40 men, 30 men, 20 men, 10 men, will God mind delivering them? But guess what? Not even 10 men were found. I'm talking men and women now that were found righteous in Sodom. And eventually we saw that afterward, where the angels went to visit Lot to tell him to prepare because the place will be destroyed. Those men of Sodom were coming, homosexuals coming to ransack the angels, saying that they wanted to have sex with them. This man was gonna willingly, freely say, okay, have sex with my children instead. But they're like, no, we want the men. And the angel struck them blind. Lot and his wife were evacuated with the kids, and they were instructed not to look back. They looked back and they returned to pillar of salt. She looked back, sorry. Lot's wife looked back and she turned to a pillar of salt. So Abraham moved on to the Negev, and when this happened, he had an encounter with Abimelech, again having to like lie about Sarah being a sister, and God showed up for him because they took his wife at this point in time, but the man didn't sleep with the wife, so that God showed up for him at that point in time, and he was delivered. And eventually Isaac was born as was promised by God. Isaac was born, and when Isaac was born, God, fulfilled his word and his covenant. But then there was still an issue with Agar and Ishmael, which led to Isaac is born now. Sarah is saying that, you know what, you gotta get rid of these people, they gotta go. And Ishmael and Agar were sent packing, and God really just showed up for her, saying that even though you're being sent away, I'm gonna show up, I'm gonna help you, I'm gonna support you. So you see, God, regardless of your fault in life, right? God still always shows up. Yeah, God still always shows up. God still always helps. That's something I've realized and I've noticed. So, chapter 22 talks about Abraham's test. Abraham was tested by God. God told him, I want to test where your allegiance is. I've given you this blessing. Will you love me more than the gift? Will you love the giver more than the gift? And God said, come sacrifice to me your son. I am Isaac. And Abraham is like, okay, God, I'm going to do it. And he was willing to sacrifice his son on Mount Moriah. And that just showed that his love was fully aligned with God. And God told him, okay, you know what? I've seen your heart. I've seen that you love me. Don't kill your son. Instead, this is a lamb that has been prepared. Kill that instead of killing your son. Afterward, Isaac goes on. Dad moves on to the next one. Sarah dies now. Then Isaac gets married. Abraham told one of his servants, you needed to seek my son getting settled to get married. And in this case, what happened was that his servant Eliezer went to Sarah's clan and all of that, and they were able to get him Rebecca. He saw her, he loved her, he was willing to get married to her, and they got married. So Isaac and Rebecca got married at this point in time. God blessed them. They have two sons, Esau and Jacob. They loved their children, but there was a covenant that came with them, right? That the elder will serve the younger, and the parents. So Isaac loved Esau, the firstborn. Rebecca, the wife, loved Jacob, the secondborn, and the family was going on. However, when Isaac was like, I'm close to dying, please go make some nice venison for me. And then Esau went to the farm, but Rebecca heard it. She had dreamed. When she had the pregnancy, she knew that, she had the prophecy coming to her that two nations are inside you, okay? And then, based off of that, she called the son Jacob and was like, this is what your dad has planned. I've made this venison available. Let's make it pretend to be your brother. This is how you're gonna put skin in put stuff in your skin, pretend to be your brother, and go. And she did that. They deceived the man, and eventually he gave the blessing to Jacob, but Esau came and was so mad. Initially, Esau had sold his birthright to Jacob, when he was like, oh my God, I'm so hungry, can you just give me whatever? And he's like, well, I'm gonna give you if you sell me your birthright. And she's like, okay, what's the birthright mean to me? So he sold the birthright to him, and now the father's blessing now is getting it, and he's so upset. He hated his brother, and Jacob had to like flee for his life, and he fled to Laban. And Laban, who is Rebecca's brother, was going to be with him for the next 20 years of his life. Just imagine that. And he goes to Laban, is there serving the first 7 years. He served with, I think he was like, okay, yeah, I'm serving, learning your craft and all of that. He's willing to get married. He loves Rachel, one of Laban's daughter. And now, after serving 7 years for her, on the wedding night, is presented Leah instead. He wakes up in the morning to see that, come on, I've been giving Leah instead of Rachel. And he's so furious. And the man is like, yo, in my culture, in my culture, the younger doesn't marry before the elder. Come on, you could have told me prior to now. Ain't that right? Anyway, that happened, and he had to like marry he had to marry her and then work another 7 years for Rachel. And that led to a whole lot of drama. And afterward, he had to say, okay, I'm done here. I need to go. And he did all of that, got some of the plants, did some stuffs around what's it called, getting some of the cattle and all of that. And eventually they went, and then he also reconciled with Esau after their long contest of almost 20 years of hatred and fighting and arguing with one another and hating on one another. 20 years later, they were able to reconcile. Just imagine one mistake leading brothers to be separated for 20 years. Just think about that. Anyway, moving on, Jacob had 13 children, 12 sons, and one daughter. There was an incident that happened with the daughter when she went out and she had an issue with a Shechemite, and then the Shechemite actually raped the daughter Dinah. And when that happened, the brothers were so furious, and Simeon and Levi went about to crush them. Like, you can't do that to our sister. They did a whole lot of stuff. Okay, if you want to marry our sister, get circumcised, be a part of us. And then eventually those people, they were massacred as a result of that. But guess what? The Bible, when you follow this story, at a point, before I round off, I'm going to tell you why some of these intricacies were being shown to us. What is the story trying to tell us? Why is it telling us what Simeon and Levi did? You will say, why did it tell us Reuben's part? How Reuben missed his blessing when you get to Genesis 49 and you see the blessing the blessing coming to the sons of Judah. The blessings coming to the sons of Jacob. Who missed what? We will consider all that. Okay, because it gives us deeper comprehension of the scripture. All right. So, after this happened, Jacob now loved Joseph more than all his other children, and this caused a lot of enmity in the family. They preferred the preference was shown by him giving him the coat of many colors, and the brothers were so jealous. Then he escalated the matter when he had dreams about him being greater than all of them and coming to share with them that all of them were going to bow to him. And they're like, are you kidding me? And then eventually they were planning to kill him. But Reuben intervened and was like, don't kill him, let's sell him instead. And eventually he was sold to slavery to the Ishmaelites. Just think about it. How the story just keeps like going around. And then it was sold to the Ishmaelite. And he got to Potiphar's wife, and Potiphar's house. He was responsible man. He was promoted in his work. And then Potiphar's wife caught he caught Potiphar's wife's attention, and she wanted to sleep with him. And he said, no, I'm not gonna do that. And that led him to jail, because the man is like, are you okay? Why would you want to rape my wife and all of that? He went to prison. When he got to prison now, he's there still continuing his scene of dreams. Then he had an encounter with Pharaoh's two servants, the butler and the baker, and interpreted their dreams and told them that when they get to wherever they're going to, one was going to be killed, the other was going to be promoted. When the one that gets promoted gets to his throne, you should remember him. He was eventually remembered. And then Pharaoh had a dream, needed interpretation. Joseph was called upon to interpret the dream. Joseph interpreted the dream. Promotion came to him. He became the what's that thing called, prime minister in Egypt, and then continued there. Promotion, and then eventually there was a famine in Canaan. The brothers needed help, and then they came to Egypt. Look at the story again. And when they came now, they are coming to meet Joseph in Egypt, and they are so they didn't even know, and they are all bowing, begging him for food. He gives them food, and then eventually, after the revelation that is Joseph, they are so upset with themselves for the evil they had done, and they are wondering, what will he do to us now? And he said something. He said, you all meant this thing for evil, but God had turned this whole thing for good to preserve life. And that was how Genesis culminated with the children of Israel being settled in Goshen in Egypt. The second part, which will go to Exodus, is how these children of Israel received, they left Egypt because there was a king that knew not Joseph. That's a summary. I'm trying to um pack a whole lot. But the purpose of this whole thing is so that you can start understanding what is the story of the Bible? What is the underlying theme? From what we have considered, we see two main things happen in Genesis when we break it down. There was an individualistic dealing of God with creation, where you first see Adam being dealt with by God, and then eventually Noah was selected by God, and all that happened. And then in Genesis chapter 11, when there was the separation unto the nations, one man was selected that God will form a nation from, through whom he would deal with humanity. So individualistic part from Genesis chapter 1 to 11, then 12 to 50 tells us about a national dealing of God, where God chooses a particular man to form a nation out of him. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, of which the 12 tribes of Israel came out from, of which eventually translate to the Messiah that was eventually promised. But that's the beginning of this series, the story of the Bible. And I'm just trying to give you a full overview of what this story entails. It's a very powerful story. And it's a story where it's powerful because we can see where we've fallen into the plan of God in this story. And we can start appreciating our Creator as a result. A lot will be unpacked, but we'll keep going to tell the story of the scripture. And I hope you stay tuned. Subscribe to Tkprudent channel. God bless you.